My name is John Muthee. I'm the founder and managing director of Agnexus. Agnexus is a market research company, and what we do is basically track the investment that farmers are making with regards to their agriculture inputs. So we see farmers as investors, and they have to make a decision around what items to be able to buy for their business. We're currently doing this in Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. We decided to partner with Resourced on this very exciting journey. The work that we do is about tracking the information, tracking the decisions that farmers are making. And SMIA was very exciting for us because what we get is what farmers are making as decisions. The reasons around the why was missing, and the incentivizations around why farmers are making certain decisions. This was very interesting for us. We were pretty excited at the opportunity when it came to partner with Resource, because there was also the opportunity of us being able to understand some of the drivers around why farmers are making the decisions that they're making around the maize seed as well as the bean seeds that they currently are buying. We've never been involved in a learning project, and so also that was part of a program, and we're quite excited, still are excited around the insights that we're getting from this project. Agnexus' role in this program, I believe, is, you can broadly call it monitoring and evaluation. We're not involved in influencing the decisions that the farmers are making at the shop level. Neither are we involved at influencing the decisions of the retailers on what to stock. Our role is basically to identify what did farmers buy from their outlets. And therefore, this is a very strong M&E component, because then you have the ability of being able to see the kind of inputs that have gone into the retailers as well as the farmers. How is that being translated at the decisions they're making at the shop level? So I would broadly call it as an M&E function that is, we think, also very powerful, because we're collecting data at a monthly level and not at a quarterly basis. So that's actually pretty exciting. I would probably say one of the biggest challenges that we're currently seeing is the fact that over the last 2 seasons, there's been a challenge around the availability of seeds. When we to think about that, the questions are the farmers making a decision based on what is available at the shop level, or are the farmers making a decision because this is what they went out to purchase? That's one of the challenges that we're facing. The other challenge really is around the cost of maize seed. Because of this shortage, the cost of maize seed has actually, in some areas, the price has actually doubled. In that, we still don't have necessarily good visibility around that, but we do believe that that has acted as a disincentive for farmers in investing in hybrid maize. I think for the SMIA program, we have a very specific focus on maize and beans, and very different products, because what we're looking at here is the function around maize being hybrid, and beans cannot be able to get genetic gains out of it. We've had very singular focus around that. But generally speaking, I think what we have seen is very different, I would say, farmer behavior by ecological zones. There are certain geographical zones where we see farmers have a higher level of adoption compared to a different area. So for example, if you take the eastern region of Kenya, this is Machakos, Makueni, and Kitui County. They tend to be more arid, and what we see there is the farmers have tended to adopt more strongly the hybrid varieties to be able to suit their environment. So I would say what we're noticing is there are differences based on ecological zones, and we're still in the early phase, and we'll keep looking and seeing how this is changing. But generally speaking, I think there is a lot of potential of learning the reason around the why farmers are making the decisions from this particular project. Why it's important to invest in, I would say, data is, for the longest time, there has been no study that has tracked the investment around what farmers are making with regards to the inputs that they buy, which then makes it very difficult for any program to actually understand where you are, because most of the time the data would be collected at a very cross-sectional basis. So if you do a study in month 1, then you probably do that as a baseline, then you would have a midline and then the end line. The challenge there becomes fairly difficult because you're not able to see the influence and you're not able to see whether the program has actually had changes. And you also have external factors that you need to take into play. For example, in this particular case, we've seen challenges around weather, we've seen challenges around availability, and we've also seen, as we were collecting data, challenges around pests and disease, for example, fall armyworms. So we think that it is critical for any project to be able to have access to as near real-time data as possible, to be able to always find out whether there are opportunities of improving or changing and learning from these inputs that they're getting back from the project that they're getting. So I think that it is a really powerful component for this particular project to be able to have data visibility on a quarterly basis as to what is happening in the market, and to be able to evaluate at a more near real-time basis on what is happening in the market. So data is powerful, and data really needs to be key in being able to influence the next steps in any project. Implications of the data for the wider stakeholders. So I would probably start off by saying, if you know the decisions that farmers are making with regards to inputs, you're able to see whether your communication is working. That's a really strong position when you actually think, if you're a seed company, whether you're multinational or a small local seed company, that's a really critical component out of that. The other aspect that we really need to look into is around all the participants within the players. So you could talk about the seed breeders and try and find out what is driving the decisions around what farmers are buying. Data is super helpful, because probably the challenge that you're looking at is the reasons for developing some specific varieties and the key benefits for each of the variety being released might be very important at the laboratory level, but this might not be in sync with what the farmers would want. And then finally, I think we're also working very closely with the agro dealers to be able to help them understand, make better decisions around their stocking behaviors and what they have in their outlets. So this is a real, I would say, opportunity for all the stakeholders to be able to look at the data that is a reflection around what smallholder farmers are making, and say, why are they making those decisions, and understand a lot better around that. So, and we don't think it's just limited to the seed farmers. We think even for the development partners, when you come in and you say, we're looking at changing the behavior around the investment in specific varieties, maybe the questions would be, looking at the data that is currently sitting now, how do we use that data to understand the drivers behind that? And therefore, you can now be able to use that to design something that is aligning with what they're looking for. I would say part of the further exploration for us with regards to the data that we think, as mentioned before, I think the work that we do is fairly, I would say it's very quantitative in nature. So what we're saying is, we have information on the decisions that farmers made. As to the why, that's where we're missing. So we believe that there is need for us to build out what we would call a farmer panel that would allow us to be able then to ask the question, why? And that's one of the key things that we believe that there is a huge opportunity in addressing. And for us, that data gap is actually fairly important to address, because then you're able to understand where is the difference between knowledge and practice and what's driving that difference. Right now, what we're measuring is practice. Okay, so we don't have, real and longitudinal information around knowledge and then practice. So is the practice influenced around what is taught, or is the practice being influenced around information they receive in terms of prioritization? Who gets more in terms of weight when I'm making a decision as a farmer? So we believe that this is one component that probably is very critical, because then also what you can do is you can track the decision process of farmers. When do they start actually considering, and what are the source of information that they will look out for? So we believe is actually fairly important. The other angle out of all this is the issue around, and especially when you talk about smallholder farmers, there's a lot of competition for the limited resources, the money that they make. So how do they make decisions around what they invest in? What do I give up to actually be able to buy a hybrid seed? So those we believe are really important questions that ideally should be able to come out from doing interviews with the farmers from a longitudinal nature, to be able to see whether there are specific areas or times that we can actually be able to influence them to make better decisions. I think success would be the seed companies would have a toolkit that they can actually be able to utilize to influence the farmers to make better decisions, because now they have an understanding. That's actually quite a tall order, because it's like your silver bullet for any industry, even in the FMCG world. But the main difference around the FMCG world is they tend to be more designed around influencing the market. Within an East African community space, what we've seen is people tend to be very trading driven. So the businesses tend to make decisions around what do I buy, what do I sell, and then within a period, have we made our money, are we happy, and this kind of thing. So what would be very interesting is for companies to be able to start taking more a marketing-led approach, and the tools that this program will hopefully be able to put in their hands will be able to, for them to predict much better, allocate their resources much better, and influence farmers in a much more positive way. That, to me, would be a key, how I would see that this program has been successful. Most of the smallholder farmers in sub-Saharan Africa practice mixed farming. And there's a lot of competing requirements around what they plant. And so very rare to find somebody who's only doing crops. And therefore it means that the requirements for inputs is actually fairly high. Where they buy this is really from the agro dealers, who have to be well trained to be able to satisfy the need of the farmers. So we're currently working on digitizing the agro dealers to actually help them run better and successful businesses, so that they can actually be able to help the farmers much better. So we hope that as the program goes along and as we continue digitizing the agro dealers, this will mean that the farmers will be able to stock the right product, which is actually key, because everything starts from the seed. When you talk about plants, they will do it at the right price, which means that the farmers will be able to buy at a decent price. And then at the right time, which means that farmers can actually make better decisions. So that really is where we as Agnexus see our ability of being able to influence the agro dealers to make sure that the smallholder farmers actually get good quality products.